He was the most elite assassin the agency had ever produced, so elite that this time, he was ordered to take out his target from 2,000 meters away. Unlike other killers, Henry always carried only one bullet for every mission, and yet, throughout his entire career, he had maintained a flawless record, 0 mistakes. He calmly chambered the round, adjusted his breathing, and settled into his rhythm. To make sure nothing slipped at the crucial moment, he even licked his fingers, ensuring a perfect grip on the trigger. Once everything was set, the target finally appeared. A train came roaring in at nearly 1,000 kilometers per hour, slicing through the landscape. The shot rang out. The mission appeared to be a complete success, but what Henry didn't know was that behind this perfect kill, a massive conspiracy was quietly unfolding. Later, a teammate handed him the surveillance footage and asked if he noticed anything unusual. Henry stared at the screen, confusion spreading across his face. According to the footage, he had clearly aimed for the target's head, yet the bullet struck the neck instead. A deviation of just 15 centimeters, for a man who had never missed before. It was an unforgivable error. Henry suddenly realized the truth he had been avoiding. With age, the precision he once took pride in, his predictive instincts and muscle memory, were beginning to decline, and there was no reversing it. For the first time, he considered walking away, leaving behind a life soaked in blood. That was when his old friend Jack called, asking to meet offshore to discuss something urgent. Henry arrived at the dock as agreed, but his instincts immediately sensed something was wrong. The familiar ticket clerk had been replaced by a young woman he'd never seen before. Though a flicker of suspicion crossed his mind, his eagerness to see Jack won out. He boarded the yacht and headed toward the agreed coordinates. Out at sea, Jack grimly revealed a terrifying truth. The man Henry had just assassinated wasn't a terrorist at all. He was a biologist who had made groundbreaking progress in cloning technology. Jack suspected the agency had deliberately concealed the target's real identity, and that something far bigger was happening behind the scenes. Before parting, Jack secretly passed Henry the contact information of an insider who knew the full story. Neither of them realized their entire conversation was already being monitored. On the way back, years of field experience made Henry uneasy. He noticed subtle tampering around the yacht's fuel gauge. Sure enough, beneath the driver's seat, he found a hidden listening device. Once ashore, Henry confronted the young woman with the bug as evidence. She insisted she was just a college student working part-time and knew nothing about it. Henry didn't bother arguing. He had a friend pull her agency credentials, instantly exposing her cover. With her identity revealed, she finally admitted the truth. Henry remained calm. After all, he'd spent decades in the agency. He was no stranger to their tricks. At the same time, agency leadership had already decided to eliminate him. Henry knew too many secrets. If he could no longer be controlled, he had to be erased. That night, Henry's phone erupted with a piercing alert. He jumped up and looked out the window. Several shadowy figures were closing in. Without hesitation, he flipped open a hidden floor panel and dropped into a concealed basement. He armed himself swiftly, then tried to warn Jack, but on the other end of the call, he heard only a single gunshot, followed by silence. Henry knew his friend was gone. Betrayal after betrayal ignited his rage. As the assassins tried to force their way inside, Henry struck from the shadows. Precise shots dropped them instantly. Even a sniper hidden at a distance was taken out before he could lock onto Henry's position. Henry then drove straight to the woman's residence and found her asleep, completely defenseless. He realized she was just a pawn, unaware of the larger scheme, and because of him, she would soon be targeted as well. As expected, assassins attacked her apartment soon after, but they had underestimated her. Anyone trained by the agency was never truly helpless. After a brief but intense struggle, she subdued the attacker and forced him to reveal the masterminds behind it all. Meanwhile, agency executives began planning again. The failed assassination had alerted their target. The next move would be far more difficult. After careful consideration, they made their decision. It was time to activate the Gemini project. Having narrowly escaped death, Henry rested at a safe house until a ghost-like figure flashed past the window. His senses snapped him awake instantly. Fully geared up, he warned the woman to stay hidden and went after the intruder alone, using reflections in puddles. He tracked the enemy's movements and fired at the perfect moment. He then took cover and pulled out his ultimate weapon, a customized rifle equipped with a red dot sight, an offset backup optic, and a 4-power scope. But when the target stepped into view, Henry froze. That face was identical to his own from decades earlier. Before Henry could react, the younger man reloaded and opened fire. Henry barely escaped with his life, Knowing he couldn't win head-on, he hijacked a motorcycle and sped toward the outskirts. The pursuit was relentless, though they looked the same. The difference was obvious. The younger Henry was faster, sharper, and overwhelmingly aggressive. At 51, Henry was being completely outmatched by a version of himself that was stronger, colder, and better trained. The chase ended when the younger Henry forced him to stop with a flawless maneuver. Henry was thrown violently from the bike, rolling across the ground. The younger man gave him no time to recover. At the final moment, police sirens cut through the chaos. The younger Henry vanished into the night, abandoning the mission for now. Henry barely survived the encounter, escaping by sheer luck and holding onto his life by a thread. After enduring this brutal, life-or-death confrontation, he finally obtained a crucial clue. From the cap the younger Henry had accidentally dropped, technicians extracted a DNA sample and compared it with Henry's own. When the test results came back, everyone was stunned. The DNA sequences were a perfect match. What did this mean? Was this some forgotten mistake from Henry's youth? An unknown son he never knew about? With his mind full of questions, Henry tracked down the insider Jack had mentioned before his death. Under relentless questioning, the man finally revealed the long-hidden truth. Everything stemmed from a cutting-edge human cloning technology, and its creator was the very biologist Henry had unknowingly assassinated. The agency's director, Clay, had been watching this technology closely for a long time. He approached the scientist with a horrifying proposal to clone a group of emotionless, absolutely obedient super assassins. The scientist firmly rejected the idea, calling it a complete violation of ethics. Enraged and humiliated, Clay decided that if the technology couldn't serve him, then its creator had to be silenced forever. Using the agency as a cover, he orchestrated the assassination and began eliminating anyone connected to the cloning project. Once Henry understood the full truth, he quickly formed a plan. He contacted Clay directly and lied, claiming he had kidnapped Danny. If Clay wanted her alive, he would have to send the younger Henry alone to make the exchange. This was exactly what Clay wanted. He had been looking for a chance to have the younger Henry permanently eliminate the older version once and for all. Henry knew this, and yet he believed that the truth might be enough to sway his clone. When the two Henrys finally met, the tension was explosive from the very start. Words failed, and fists took over. After a vicious hand-to-hand fight, both men tumbled into a pool of water. Weakened by age, Henry slowly lost strength. Underwater, the younger Henry pinned him down, cutting off his air. Just as Henry was about to suffocate, Danny arrived in the nick of time and fired a shot, hitting the younger Henry and saving Henry's life. Upon learning that he was nothing more than a manufactured clone, the younger Henry was consumed by rage and betrayal. He stormed back to confront Clay. Clay tried to placate him with talk of fatherly care, but he had badly underestimated how fast this clone had evolved. This version of Henry could already think, judge, and choose for himself. Meanwhile, Henry and Danny followed an informant's lead to Clay's hidden stronghold, but they walked straight into an ambush set by the younger Henry. He shot Henry, thankfully not with a lethal round, but with a special test bullet containing bee venom. The younger Henry was testing whether they shared the same allergy. Once confirmed, he handed over the antidote. From that moment on, they were no longer enemies, they became allies united against Clay. The three of them drove toward Clay's core laboratory. On the way, the younger Henry sensed extreme danger ahead and shouted for them to get out. The next second, a massive explosion engulfed the vehicle. A close ally who failed to escape was killed instantly. Moments later, a man clad in full tactical armor opened fire on them. During a reload, Henry and Danny counterattacked with flawless coordination, cutting down wave after wave of attackers, but Danny was shot in the leg. Henry dragged her into an abandoned warehouse, only to realize all three of them were almost out of ammunition. Just then, the younger Henry arrived and eliminated the remaining enemies. They barely had time to breathe before the armored man charged again. Bullets bounced harmlessly off his high-tech armor. His strength and speed were terrifying, almost inhuman. Realizing brute force wouldn't work, they resorted to strategy. Henry kicked the man back, creating an opening. Danny hurled a gas tank and shot it, triggering a violent explosion. To their horror, the man emerged from the flames completely unharmed, his regenerative ability beyond comprehension. In a final move, the younger Henry aimed at the armor's joint seams and fired multiple shots, finally bringing the monster down. When they removed his helmet, they froze. Underneath was yet another face identical to Henry's. 3 generations of clones, complete. At that moment, Clay stepped out from the shadows, making one last attempt to bargain. He promised endless clones, A legacy that would never die. Henry didn't let him finish. In the end, the Gemini cloning facility was destroyed, and the unethical experiment was permanently shut down. With Henry's help, the younger Henry received a new identity, and finally began a life of his own, free from control. As for Henry, he laid down his burdens at last, and started a quiet, hard-earned life of happiness with Danny. The movie ends here. Thanks for your watching. Leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out.